There's an old Sicilian proverb whispered in the shadows of Palermo's ancient streets. Chi mangia fa mudici. He who eats makes crumbs. But they never tell you the second part, the part grandmothers murmur while crossing themselves. E chi parla fa nemici. And he who speaks makes enemies. Picture this. A man sits in a Venetian cafe, 1502, watching gondolas drift through morning mist like funeral barges. His name is Niccolò, and he's just discovered something terrible about power. Not the kind written in treaties or carved into marble thrones, but the kind that seeps through silence like blood through bandages. He watches a merchant across the piazza, loud, boastful, revealing his trade routes to anyone who'll listen. Within a month, that merchant will be ruined by competitors who listened more than they spoke. Niccolò takes notes, the birth of a philosophy written in other men's failures. You see, modern psychology, those sterile 2024 studies from Harvard and Oxford, they'll tell you about cognitive load and information asymmetry. But Machiavelli knew it as something more primal. Your words are your blood, and every conversation is a small hemorrhage. The researchers found that executives who speak 40% less in meetings are perceived as 73% more competent. Numbers, statistics, but they miss the poetry of it, the exquisite agony of swallowing your own brilliance like bitter medicine. I once knew a man who collected silences the way others collect wine. He'd sit in boardrooms, counting heartbeats between words, savoring the panic that fills empty air. People would confess to him, not because he asked, but because his silence became a gravity well that pulled secrets from throats like teeth. He became CEO not through eloquence, but through the terrible patience of a spider who knows the web speaks louder than the spinner. Here's what they don't tell you about Machiavellian silence. It's not absence. It's presence. It's the dark matter between stars, the pause between heartbeats where death briefly visits. When you speak less, you become a mirror, and mirrors are the most honest liars in existence. People see themselves in your silence and mistake it for understanding. They project their fears onto your quietude and call it wisdom. The Tao Te Ching warns that those who know do not speak, those who speak do not know. But Machiavelli would have laughed at such poetry. His silence wasn't spiritual, it was surgical. Every unspoken word was a scalpel kept sharp for the right moment. Every bitten tongue was an investment in future power. Do you feel it? That itch in your throat when someone else is wrong? That burning need to correct, to explain, to prove your intelligence? That's your ego, and it's been poisoning you since birth. A 2025 neuroscience study found that the urge to speak activates the same neural pathways as addiction. We're junkies for our own voices, dealers of our own demise. There's a Romanian folktale about a king who decreed that anyone who spoke in his presence would lose their tongue. His court became a symphony of gestures, a ballet of implications. But here's the twist. The king himself forgot how to speak. Power had made him so silent that words rotted in his mouth like overripe fruit. He died choking on a single word he'd saved for 20 years. Help. This is the first paradox of Machiavellian silence. The less you reveal, the more you become. But becoming what? There's the delicious horror of it. You become whatever they fear most. To the guilty, your silence is judgment. To the ambitious, it's a challenge. To the weak, it's strength they'll never possess. Consider the modern dating landscape. Those grotesque digital masquerades where everyone performs their best self in 280 characters or less. The men who succeed aren't the ones writing paragraphs of desire. They're the ones who respond with such calculated brevity that women spend hours decoding 3 words like archaeologists with ancient runes. Sounds good? 2 words that have launched 1,000 anxious text conversations with girlfriends. But here's what Machiavelli knew that pickup artists don't. True silence isn't manipulation, it's metamorphosis. When you stop explaining yourself, you stop being explainable. You become a question mark in a world of exclamation points. And questions, my friend, are more powerful than any answer. Tell me, when was the last time you let someone misunderstand you and felt the strange power of their confusion? When did you last bite your tongue so hard you tasted copper and realized it was the flavor of self-control? Solitude is the only lover who never lies to you. In the hills above Florence, there's a monastery where monks take a vow of silence so absolute that they forget the sound of their own names. But here's what the tourist guides won't tell you. Every year, one or two of them laugh. Not from joy, but from the cosmic absurdity of discovering that in perfect silence, you can finally hear the universe mocking you. Machiavelli wrote The Prince in Exile, you know, banished from Florence, tortured, then discarded like a broken tool. Picture him in his farmhouse, surrounded by vineyards and bitterness, writing by candlelight while the wax drips like small suicides onto his pages. No courtiers to impress, no allies to maintain. Just him, the night, and the terrible freedom of having nothing left to lose. That's when he discovered the second truth. Power doesn't come from controlling others. It comes from no longer needing them. There's a word in Japanese, hikikomori, for those who withdraw entirely from society. The psychiatrists call it a disorder. The newspapers call it an epidemic. But what if it's evolution? What if these young men barricading themselves in bedrooms aren't sick but prescient? They've seen the game and decided not to play. In silence, in solitude, they're building kingdoms where they're the only citizens and every law is written in their favor. A 2024 study from the University of Tokyo found something disturbing. Men who spent more than 60% of their time alone reported higher life satisfaction than those in relationships. The researchers scrambled to explain it away: selection bias, measurement error, cultural factors. But maybe, just maybe, these solitary men had discovered what Machiavelli knew. The only person who can never betray you is yourself, and even that's negotiable. I'll tell you a secret that would have cost me my tongue in Renaissance Italy. Love is a luxury for those who can afford to be weak. Every "I love you" is a treaty waiting to be broken. Every kiss is intelligence gathered for future warfare. The modern man opens his heart like a fool, displaying his battle plans, then wonders why he keeps losing wars he didn't know he was fighting. But solitude. Solitude is the fortress where you can finally remove your armor. No performance required. No lies to maintain. No exhausting dance of pretending to be whoever they need you to be today. In solitude, you can be gloriously, grotesquely yourself. You can eat cold pizza at 3 a.m. while reading Schopenhauer, and nobody will post about it on Instagram. You can cry watching animated movies about robots learning to love, and nobody will use it against you in the next argument. The Stoics had a phrase: all cruelty springs from weakness. But they never met a man who'd been strong for so long that cruelty became his native language. When you speak less, when you need less, when you want less, you become dangerous in the way a fasting tiger is dangerous. Not aggressive, just unconcerned with your survival. There's a peculiar thing that happens when you embrace true solitude. The voices in your head, the ones that sound like your ex, your father, your third-grade teacher who said you'd never amount to anything, they get quieter. Not because they're gone, but because you finally realize they were always your voice, doing impressions. In silence, you can't hide from the ventriloquist act of your own self-hatred. A behavioral economist in Copenhagen, 2025 if you're keeping track of the decay of civilization, discovered that men who practice strategic solitude, his sterile term for chosen loneliness, accumulate wealth 47% faster than their social counterparts. Less money spent on peacocking. Less energy wasted on maintaining relationships that were always transactions disguised as affection. Less everything, which somehow becomes more. But here's the twist that would make Machiavelli smile from whatever circle of hell they reserved for honest men. The power you gain from needing no one makes everyone need you. It's the most delicious paradox. Become truly alone, and suddenly you're never lonely because everyone wants to solve the mystery of your self-sufficiency. I knew a consultant once, a fixer they called him, who lived by a simple rule. Never speak first in any meeting, never attend any social function, never explain his methods. His apartment was a monk's cell with better whiskey. No photos, no mementos. Just books and silence and the kind of cleanliness that suggests a man with too much time to think. Companies paid him millions to solve problems with 3-word emails. Women pursued him like he was the last man on earth, which in a way, he was. The last man who didn't need them to complete him. You want to know the most terrifying question you can ask yourself? Not, what if I die alone? But what if I live alone and discover I prefer it? What if every relationship you've ever had was just an elaborate way to avoid meeting yourself in an empty room? So here's my challenge. You beautiful wretch, reading this in the blue light of your phone while someone sleeps beside you. Tomorrow, drive somewhere alone. Turn off your phone. Sit in your car in perfect silence for 1 hour. No music, no podcasts, no scrolling. Just you and the terrifying void of your own company. See who shows up when there's no audience to perform for. Every man who tried to save you is buried in your choices. Listen, do you hear that? It's the sound of 1,000 relationships dying, not with screams but with sighs, like air leaving a punctured lung, like hope evaporating from a drunk's promise. That's the symphony of men learning Machiavelli's third truth. The road to power is paved with the corpses of your former selves, and every woman who loved those men is now a widow to ghosts you murdered. In Prague, there's a clock tower where automated apostles march in circles every hour, an endless procession of the faithful going nowhere. The tourists gather and point their cameras, but locals know the real show happens at 3 a.m. when the streets are empty and you can hear the gears grinding like teeth. That's when you understand. We're all automatons pretending our circles mean something. Machiavelli wrote, "Everyone sees what you appear to be. Few experience what you really are." But he never warned us about the horror of that gap. The chasm between performance and truth where good men go to die. Every time you've silenced your needs to keep peace, every time you've swallowed your anger to avoid conflict, every time you've said, "Oh, it's fine," when your soul was screaming, you were digging your own grave with a smile. Modern therapy, that sanitized confessional where you pay someone to pretend your damage is fixable, they have a term, self-abandonment. As if betraying yourself is as simple as leaving a party early. But Machiavelli knew it was closer to patricide. You don't abandon yourself, you assassinate yourself, slowly, one compromise at a time, until the man in the mirror is a stranger wearing your face. I'll paint you a picture. A man, 3 a.m., standing in his bathroom. The house is silent except for the suburban ghost sounds. Refrigerator hum, clock tick, the whisper of his life leaking away. His wife sleeps in their bed, satiated with the performance of happiness he delivered at dinner. His children dream in rooms he's still paying for. And him? He's looking at his reflection, trying to remember when he agreed to this. When did he sign the contract that traded his silence for their comfort? A 2024 psychological study from Berlin found that men in long-term relationships lose an average of 73% of their social connections within 5 years. They called it relationship coconing, such a gentle term for suffocation, but the real horror was in the footnotes. These men reported feeling more alone with their partners than they ever felt when single, surrounded by love and drowning in isolation. You see, when you master Machiavellian silence, you discover something terrible. Most people don't want to know you. They want to know their idea of you. Your silence becomes a screen where they project their fantasies, and any word you speak risks shattering their illusion. So you learn to be a ghost that haunts your own life, present but never really there. The ancient Greeks had a myth about Echo, cursed to only repeat what others said. But the real curse? Narcissus, who fell in love with his own reflection and wasted away staring at it. Every good man who sacrifices his voice for harmony becomes Narcissus in reverse, falling in love with who others need him to be, wasting away performing it. Here's a game Machiavelli would appreciate. Count how many times a day you lie, not the big lies, the microscopic betrayals. How are you? Fine. Lie. Do you want to go? Sure. Lie. Is everything okay? Of course. Lie. Each one a small suicide, a tiny funeral for the man you could have been if you'd had the courage to disappoint people. But power, real power, comes from disappointing people strategically, from saying no, so rarely that when you do, it reshapes reality around your refusal. The man who never complains has earthquakes in his silence. The man who never refuses has atom bombs in his no. There's a businessman in Shanghai who built an empire on 3 words. I'll consider it. Never, yes. Never, no. Just eternal contemplation that drove competitors mad with uncertainty. His wife left him after 20 years, said living with him was like being married to fog. His children send Christmas cards to his office because they don't know where else he exists. But his silence? His silence trades for millions on the stock exchange. A neuroscientist in Stockholm, 23, the year of our ongoing dissolution, discovered that men who practice selective mutism, choosing when and if to speak, show increased activity in the prefrontal cortex associated with executive function. In layman's terms, shutting up makes you smarter, but it also rewires your brain for loneliness. You become fluent in a language only you speak. The most insidious part? The good intentions. Every woman who says she wants you to open up, every friend who insists you share more, every therapist who encourages you to be vulnerable, they're not lying. They believe it, but what they want is controlled detonation, not the nuclear winter of your actual thoughts. They want the performance of depth, not the abyss itself. So here's my question for you. You beautiful catastrophe reading this while your life ticks away in notification sounds. What would happen if you stopped? Not forever, just for a week. What if you only spoke when the words clawed their way out? What if you let every small talk conversation die in awkward silence? What if you discovered that the man everyone loves is built on the grave of the man you were meant to be? The woman who loves you is mourning a man who never existed. There's a Venetian mask maker who went mad trying to craft the perfect face. Not beautiful, perfect. He believed that somewhere in the intersection of porcelain and paint was a mask that would show people who they really were. They found him dead in his workshop, surrounded by 1,000 attempts, wearing nothing on his face but tears. The authorities called it suicide. The philosophers called it enlightenment. Machiavelli understood something about love that would make romantics vomit. It's not a feeling, it's a negotiation. Every I love you is a bid. Every kiss is a contract. And silence? Silence is the only currency that never inflates. When you stop speaking, you stop devaluing yourself in the marketplace of affection. Picture this. A couple at dinner, 2025. Any city where the apartments cost more than souls are worth. She's talking about her day, her dreams, her mother's opinions about their future. He's nodding, smiling, making the right sounds at the right moments. But behind his eyes? Nothing. Not anger, not boredom, just the terrible stillness of a man who's realized he's been cast in a play he never auditioned for. The University of Melbourne released a study that should have ended modern romance. Couples who communicate less report higher relationship satisfaction for the first 2 years, then catastrophic decline. They called it the silence honeymoon. But what they missed was the beauty of those 2 years, the exquisite fiction of being unknowable, the erotic charge of mystery before it curdled into resentment. I knew a man who saved every text his ex-girlfriend sent. Not from nostalgia, from anthropology. He studied them like ancient scrolls, tracking the decay of affection through emoji frequency and response times. Love you became love you became K. He said watching love die in real time was like watching time-lapse photography of fruit rotting, horrible and hypnotic and somehow honest in a way the fresh fruit never was. Here's what they don't tell you about the strong, silent type. It's not strength, it's exhaustion. It's the bone-deep weariness of a man who's learned that every word he speaks will be used as evidence in a trial he didn't know was happening. So he pleads the fifth to existence itself. Kierkegaard wrote about the aesthetic man who lives only in the moment, the ethical man who lives by duty, and the religious man who lives by faith. But he missed the fourth type, the Machiavellian man who lives by strategy, who treats every human connection like a chess game where the only winning move is not to play. There's a Japanese term, hone and tatemai, your true feelings versus your public facade. But what happens when you wear the mask so long it fuses to your skin? What happens when the performance becomes more real than the performer? Modern men are method actors who forgot they were acting, trapped in characters they can't break. A behavioral psychologist in Toronto documented something chilling in 2024. Men who practice emotional minimalism, his term for strategic silence, become more attractive to women initially but less capable of genuine intimacy over time. It's like building immunity to poison by taking small doses. Eventually you can't be hurt, but you also can't be healed. The cruelest joke? Women say they want emotional availability, but they're attracted to emotional scarcity. They chase the silent man like art collectors chase stolen paintings. Not despite their inaccessibility, but because of it. Every woman thinks she'll be the one to unlock him, to decode him, to find the secret garden behind the stone wall. They never realize the wall goes all the way through. I'll tell you a secret darker than any Machiavelli dared write. The opposite of love isn't hate, it's strategy. When you calculate every word, measure every gesture, weigh every silence for maximum impact, you're not in a relationship. You're in a war where both sides are pretending it's a dance. But here's where it gets delicious. When you master this kind of silence, you become irresistible to a certain kind of broken. The wounded seek the distant, the anxious crave the unavailable. The fixers are drawn to the unfixable. Your silence becomes a mirror for their neuroses, and they mistake the reflection for depth. There's a man in Berlin who hasn't spoken to his wife in 3 years, not from anger, from agreement. They communicate entirely through gestures, glances, the grammar of shared space. She tells people it's the happiest she's ever been. He tells no one anything. Their friends call it performance art. Their therapist called it a breakthrough. But late at night, when the city sleeps and even the silence has silence, you can hear them breathing in rhythm. Two people who've transcended the need for words by accepting they never understood each other anyway. So here's my challenge, you gorgeous disaster scrolling through this in bed while someone sleeps beside you. Tomorrow, try radical honesty through radical silence. Don't lie. Just don't speak. Watch how quickly communication reveals itself as interrogation. Watch how sharing becomes demanding. Watch how the person who claims to love you panics when you stop providing the words they need to maintain their fiction of who you are. What's that? You can feel them stirring beside you, the weight of their expectation like gravity. That's not love, darling. That's audience participation. And you? You've been performing for so long, you've forgotten you could simply walk off stage. In perfect silence, you finally hear God laughing at your plans. In the mountains of Tibet, there's a cave where monks go to die. Not their bodies. Those stubborn meat puppets continue for decades. They go to murder the last voice inside them, the one that still believes in tomorrow. They call it enlightenment. Machiavelli would have called it graduation. This is the final secret, the one that turns princes into kings and kings into ghosts. When you master silence completely, you discover there was never anyone to talk to anyway. Every conversation you've ever had was just you, arguing with different versions of yourself wearing other people's faces. The cosmic joke that makes angels weep and devils applaud. A neuroscientist in Zurich, 2020, the year where all pretending still matters, made a discovery that should have ended civilization. The human brain can't actually tell the difference between talking to others and talking to itself. The same neurons fire. The same chemicals release. We're all schizophrenics in denial, and the only difference between sanity and madness is consensus. But here's what happens when you stop speaking entirely. The world doesn't end. Your relationships don't crumble. Reality doesn't collapse. Instead, something far more terrifying occurs. Nothing. The great fear that kept you performing, kept you explaining, kept you justifying your existence with words. It was protecting you from the truth that you were never as necessary as you believed. I'll paint you the portrait of a man who learned this too well. 43 years old, successful by every metric that matters to people who don't matter. He started practicing Machiavellian silence as strategy. Spoke less in meetings, won more contracts, texted less to women, received more attention, shared less with friends, gained more respect. But silence is a hungry god, and what begins as fasting becomes starvation. By year 3, he could go weeks speaking only transactionally. Coffee, black, yes, no, send the files. His power grew as his world shrank. CEOs sought his counsel he never gave. Women orbited his absence like planets around a dead star. He had everything and nothing, was everyone's mystery and no one's solution. The ancient Sufis had a saying, when the heart weeps for what it's lost, the spirit laughs for what it's found. But they never warned that sometimes the spirit's laughter sounds exactly like screaming. Here's the delicious horror Machiavelli discovered in exile. When you need no one, you become everyone's need. When you say nothing, you become everything. It's the ultimate paradox. Achieve perfect power through perfect withdrawal, then realize power over nothing is still nothing. A philosopher in Seoul documented what he called the silence spiral. Men who begin with strategic quiet for advantage, but end in existential muteness from habit. First, you stop small talk, then emotional talk, then all unnecessary communication. Finally, even necessary words feel like betrayal of some purer state. You become a monk in a monastery of your own making, where every wall is invisible and every vow is to yourself. But here's the twist that makes it all worthwhile. In that perfect silence, that total withdrawal, that complete tactical disengagement from the human comedy, you finally meet yourself. Not the performance, not the strategy, not the man you've been pretending to be since consciousness cursed you with self-awareness. The real you, the one who exists in the space between heartbeats, in the pause between thoughts, in the terrible freedom of needing nothing from anyone. And what you find might destroy you, or save you, or both, because at that level of silence, destruction and salvation become synonyms for change. The Zen masters speak of killing the Buddha, destroying even your concept of enlightenment, but Machiavelli would go further. Kill everyone. Not literally, he was practical, not psychotic, but symbolically. Every voice in your head that isn't yours, every expectation you've swallowed, every role you've played. Murder them all with silence and see what remains. There's a man in Stockholm who learned this perfectly. He speaks 17 words per day, calculated for maximum impact. His company trades for billions. His solitude is absolute. His power is undeniable. And late at night, in the perfect silence of his perfect life, he sometimes remembers what laughter sounded like when it wasn't strategic. But the memory fades, like everything does when there's no one to share it with. So here's my final question, you beautiful catastrophe who's made it this far into the abyss. What would happen if you won? If you achieved perfect Machiavellian silence, accumulated all the power it promises, needed no one and nothing? What if you climbed the mountain of tactical withdrawal only to discover the view from the top is just more mountains, stretching forever into a horizon where you stand alone, victorious and defeated, a king of nothing ruling subjects who exist only in the kingdom of your refusal to engage? The phone in your hand is buzzing. Someone needs you to speak, to perform, to exist for their comfort. You could answer. You could play the game one more time. Or you could set it down. Walk to the window, stand in silence so complete it becomes a prayer to whatever God laughs at human plans. And in that silence, maybe, just maybe, you'll hear the most terrifying sound of all. Your own voice, saying nothing, meaning everything.